Welcome to our overview of cause and effect essays. Today we'll be covering the basics, what they are, how to do them. Alright, so what is the purpose of a cause and effect essay? We need to have some idea of why we're actually doing this if we're going to care about it. Well, cause and effect essays are about tracing the reasons and the results of a chain of events. So they're going to ask two basic questions. First, on the one side, why or how did this event happen? Or, you can go on the other end and you can ask, what was the result of this thing that we're studying? Result or results, as the case may be. And to what end do you write these types of essays? Well, cause and effect exposition is usually a big part of any analysis, and so you're going to see this basic idea popping up in all kinds of different projects, all kinds of different essays. Anywhere an author needs to explain the origins of a problem or the justification of a proposed solution, they're going to go back and they're going to analyze the cause and effect chain of events to say this happened, this caused this, this was the result of that, these results had these causes, and therefore we should take this action. And so it's how you make informed decisions. And so we shouldn't be surprised that you use cause and effect type writing in all kinds of different places. In academia, one of the really big ones, obviously, is historical studies. When you're going back and trying to find out why people did what they did, what were the results of their actions, how did that affect what was happening, and therefore, how can we use that knowledge to make real decisions that affect real people in today's world? It's also a big thing in scientific analysis when you're going back trying to trace the different parts of your experiment to come up with your theories and whatnot. You're going to be doing cause and effect, trying to figure out what effects resulted from what causes and vice versa. It's also, of course, very, very big in the rest of the world. And if you go out of academia, you're going to be doing a lot of it. Business analysis is essentially cause and effect, which you'll be writing as emails, you'll be writing as memos, you'll be doing reports, going through, tracing the cause and effect of all of these various and sundry issues so that people can make better informed business decisions. Government work and planning, same basic idea. You need to know what is happening and what the causes and effects are so that you can make the best decision. And it's at the heart of general problem solving. If you're having an issue, you identify the cause that is producing the undesired effect and you try to eliminate it. That takes cause and effect exposition. All right, so how do you actually put together a cause and effect essay? First, what does a good KOSHER thesis statement look like for your exams? Well, first, remember, the key here is to trace undeniable connections between events. So your thesis needs to emphasize just that. You want to have one cause that you break down into three effects, or one effect for which you demonstrate three contributing causes. And yes, of course, it can get much more complicated than that. We'll talk about it in a little bit. But for your exams, it should be a 1-3, the same sort of thing we've seen all along. One cause into three effects, or one effect into three contributing causes. And do not forget the plan of development. Here are a couple of examples of that I might suggest for you to consider. 3 possible negative effects of long-distance dating are distrust, loneliness, and frustration. So you've got the one cause, long-distance dating, and the effects, distrust, loneliness, and frustration. The American War of 1812 resulted from a new generation of American political hubris, British attacks on American shipping on the high seas, and continuing Native American attacks on frontier settlements. So you've got the one effect that resulted from the 3 individual causes that you've listed in your plan of development. If we unpack that further, here's a look at what the preferred version is for your exams. You start off with a funnel type introduction, no surprise there. You've got your hook, that leads to your thesis statement, and in your thesis statement you again need to either do one cause into multiple effects or one effect that links to 3 causes. Do not do both. That's considered too much to try to do in an exam essay, and they frown upon that. So use either one or the other. In main body number 1, you do either a cause or you do an effect, depending on how you wrote your thesis statement. Same thing for main bodies 2 and 3. Again, you want to stick to either one, either a cause or an effect. Don't try to do both. They want you to keep it simple and straightforward. Finally, you've got your conclusion, the standard reverse funnel type that ends in your mic drop moment. Well, now, as we've mentioned several times over the course of this class, there's the way UIM does it, and then there's the way the rest of the world does it. UIM, again, has to choose a way to do it to test you on, so that makes sense. But I'd like you to have at least an idea of what some of the other options look like. So here is another one called a chain type organization. You start off with your introduction, with your thesis statement and whatnot. The main body, though, takes a look at one effect and one cause. Main body 2, one cause and one effect. Main body 3, one cause and one effect. Your main body paragraphs are going to tend to be a little bit longer, and you don't have to stop with just 3 body paragraphs in this particular type of organization. Again, don't do that on your exams. But I hope you can see how this sort of each one sort of balances the other out, and it gives a feeling of completeness. It also lets you see very clearly one cause to one effect. Another type of rest of the world essay is called the block type organization. Starts again with the introduction and thesis. Main body 1 examines cause 1. Main body 2 examines cause 2. And you keep examining one cause, more or less, per paragraph until you get done with the causes. Then you have a transition sentence or even a transition paragraph where we're able to clearly see you move from now we're talking about causes to now we're talking about effects, and you repeat the same process. Main body 3, effect 1, main body 4, effect 2, 3, 4, 5, however many you need to do. Again, you can see that symmetry, you can see that balance between the causes and the effects, but you handle all of one type of issue at once, and then you move to the other. And wrap it all up again with that conclusion. As you might expect, cause and effect essays generally have their own structure, and they have their own structure words, their own vocabulary. Here's a look at one rendition of them. The idea, of course, is to show what happens first and then what follows. What is the cause, obviously, and what is the effect. And here's some example language that you can use in your essays. The first cause of Y is X. The next reason is X. Owing to X is due to X, and as far as effect goes. As a result, as a consequence, consequently, thus, hence, this results in, this causes, this has an effect on. You could keep going on and on. Hopefully you get the idea. I'll put the link to this site in the description of this video so you can look at it further. And finally, what are some things to look out for as you're trying to write your first or your umpteenth cause and effect essay? The biggest dangers of cause and effect essays are actually logical, and they usually happen when you're thinking out your essay trying to decide what to say. First, you've got the bias problem. Unfortunately, a lot of us, I think this is kind of a human tendency, come into the question of cause and effect with our own set of preconceived ideas. So we look at a question, we look at a problem, and we expect to see a certain result because it's the result we want to see. And so rather than actually go through and dig through all the details of the cause and effect web that has been formed, we just look at the ones that we want, and that's what we present in our essay. So the very first thing you have to do is make sure that you're conscious of your biases and that you're being as fair as you possibly can. The bias problem itself, and other things, often lead to a string of logical fallacies that are very often associated with cause and effect essays. First, we have the fallacy of post hoc propter hoc, which is Latin for after this, because of this. This fallacy looks at things that are two things that happen. It sees one thing happens first, another thing happens right after it, and therefore they assume that the two things must be connected. Well, the simple fact is there's lots of stuff going on at any given time. And therefore, just because one thing happens just before something else, it doesn't automatically mean that the two are causally connected. A very similar fallacy is the fallacy of cum hoc propter hoc. This is a fallacy that, from the Latin translated, means with this because of this. So this sees two things happening at the same time. One thing is going up, the other thing is going down. One thing is beginning, the other thing is ending. Whatever it is, it sees this correlation between the two sides, and it makes the assumption that if they're happening at the same time, they must be connected. And that's certainly not the case. There's a famous example that could also be used for post hoc propter hoc of a lady who was taking a transatlantic cruise, and her ship was coming into the harbor, and unbeknownst to her, because she had an interior cabin, her ship was about to have a collision with another ship in the harbor. Well, as she reached up to flip on the light switch, at the exact same moment, she flipped on the switch and the collision occurred. And she was thrown to the floor, and the ship came to a screeching halt. And she ran out of the room and grabbed the first crew member she could find and apologized tearfully because she had hit the ship's emergency brake. Yeah, right. Well, hopefully you can see what this illustrates. She flipped the switch at the same time the collision occurred. Therefore, she made the assumption that with this, because of this. Certainly not the case. And pro hoc propter hoc is also one worth mentioning. It's usually avoidable because it means before this, because of this. This is the fallacy of putting the effect before the cause. And yes, it actually does happen. How could it happen? Well, if you don't really know what you're talking about, if you're not really understanding the whole historical context and situation, you can sometimes make the mistake of blaming an effect on a cause when the effect had been around much longer than the cause itself had. So you just have to make sure you actually know your facts for this one. And the way to get around all of these is you have to draw clear, intentional connections between cause and effect, and you have to demonstrate those connections via data. You have to actually give proof. You can't just say, well, I think this, therefore this. You have to show how the two things are connected. That should be something you cover in your body paragraph in at least a sentence. Well, I hope that was helpful. Let me know if you have questions.